Good afternoon. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Washington Informer News. I'm your host, Denise Rolark Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer, and we're talking to you right here from Washington, D.C., where there's been a lot of activities going on. And that's just saying it really lightly, but you all know. But we have a great show planned for you today, and as much as we enjoy bringing you the lighter side of the news on WIN TV and your WIN TV experience, today we're still jolted by the domestic terrorists that have attacked the U.S. Capitol earlier this week. Later in the program, however, we will be talking to reporters James Wright, Sam Collins, Stacy Brown, and photographer and videographer Anthony Tillman about the demonstration and invasion at the U.S. Capitol and its impact on the District of Columbia. But first, I hope you picked up a copy of the Washington Informer newspaper. You know, we went to press before the Trump-inspired riot took place on Wednesday, but right after two Democrats from Georgia won the Georgia Senate runoff on Tuesday. Raphael Warnock, a Black Baptist preacher, and John Ossoff, a documentary film producer and investigative journalist who happens to also be Jewish. They're both first in Georgia of those backgrounds to represent the state as Democrats and as Republicans, which now makes well, we'll talk about it a little bit more later on, but what makes the Senate now a 50-50 split, which means that there's more that can be done, we hope, for the Americans in America, those of us who are voters who voted. Thank you, Sherry, for helping me out here. But we also reported on the outrage coming out of Kenosha, Wisconsin, where prosecutors once again declined to prosecute the police officer who shot Jacob Black in the back 7 times last August. These stories are in this week's edition of the Washington Informer. And if you have not picked up your copy of the Washington Informer, you can visit us at washingtoninformer.com. That's a good place to visit the newspaper, our website, where you can get copies of the newspaper. You can call us here at the office at 202-561-4100 to find out where you can get a copy of the newspaper. And we certainly do love the fact that you're following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, where you can get up-to-date news anytime you want it from our publication. So while our minds have been focused on the domestic terrorists who invaded our city and wreaked havoc on the United States Capitol, we're still haunted by COVID-19. But fortunately, most district residents heeded Mayor Bowser's request to stay home, but there's no doubt that President Trump, once again, is responsible for holding another super spreader event. No one's talking about all those thousands of demonstrators that were not only spewing hatred, but undoubtedly the coronavirus as well. And joining us today is the esteemed president of Howard University, Dr. A.I. Frederick, and Dr. Cecil Bennett, a diplomat for the American Board of Family Medicine and Chief Executive Officer of Primary Diagnostic Systems in Atlanta, Georgia. And to help bring our attention back to the front and center on this pandemic that has killed over 360,000 U.S. citizens and more than 800 in the District of Columbia. And the rollout of a vaccine that is hoped to save lives, including Black lives, that have suffered the most throughout this pandemic. So we look forward to talking to them. And then Washington Informer Prince George's County editor William Ford will be talking about police reform with Maryland State Delegate Jazz Lewis, who is chair of the Democratic Caucus and chair of the Family Law Subcommittee and a member of the Judiciary Committee. In the wee hours of Thursday morning, the Electoral College finally certified the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as president and vice president-elect. And by that, President-elect Biden has also announced that Merrick Garland will be the next U.S. Attorney General. Kristen Clarke, we know her very well here in Washington, D.C., Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, will be nominated to lead the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, and Vanita Gupta, a former acting civil rights chief, will be nominated to serve as Associate Attorney General. So now Biden has named pretty much has picked all of most of his members of the federal departments. The only opening slot that's still left is head of the CIA. And speaking of the runoff election in Georgia, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will now serve as Senate tiebreaker now that Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff have won their Senate races, bringing the Senate, as we said before, to a 50-50 tie. Stacey Abrams, LaTosha Brown, and the outpouring of Black voters in Georgia are credited for the Democratic victories there. We cannot say how much they played a role in that election turnout, just as Black voters did all across the country, beginning with that one endorsement of the congressman from South Carolina, and why am I drawing a blank? But you all know who I'm talking about from South Carolina. It's going to pop in my head a few minutes. That's what happens when I just had a birthday, y'all. So, I'm counting years on this, but it'll come to me. Clyburn. Thank you. Congressman James Clyburn, who was one of the first to endorse Senator Biden after in his bid for the presidency. In COVID-19 news, the death toll from the coronavirus is growing, and we're hoping we don't see that number grow anymore, especially in the DMV. So please wear your mask, wash your hands, and if you can, stay home. If you can't, please practice social distancing. So right now, let's watch a WIN TV news update from Curtis Knowles. We'll be right back.
This is WIN TV News, bringing you the news that matters. The arduous year of 2020 is finally over. 2021 is upon us. The Electoral College will be sealing the deal of the 46th president-elect Joe Biden on Wednesday, January 6. In response to the loss of the election, President Trump has displayed disdain over the results and even threatened to not concede the office of the president. Trump's claims of election fraud has spurred his supporters to plan protests in response to the Electoral College's decision as well. Key groups that will be a part of the protests include the 80% Coalition, the Silent Majority, and the Proud Boys. The leader of the Proud Boys was arrested in D.C. on Monday by Metropolitan Police. Henry Enrique Tarrio was placed under arrest for having participated in destruction of property by ripping and burning a Black Lives Matter flag from two historically Black churches. The churches are the Ashbury United Methodist and Metropolitan AME. Tarrio was released but ordered to not return to the city. In response to these looming protests, D.C. has the National Guard on standby. Signs about D.C. gun ordinances have been placed around the city. D.C. police had some violent clashes with the protesters on Tuesday night. A total of 6 arrests were made, 3 men and 2 women. Wednesday saw the largest developments as protesters stormed the U.S. Capitol whilst Congress was still in the middle of confirming the Electoral College votes. Lawmakers were sealed inside and the debates were placed on hold. The security breaches led D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser to declare a citywide curfew starting at 6 p.m. Wednesday until 6 a.m. Thursday. This is Curtis Knowles reporting with WIN TV News.
Thank you, Curtis. And we are very proud to have Curtis as one of our newest reporters here at the Washington Informer. He's a graduate of Morgan State University. Go Bears. And you'll be seeing more of his broadcasts and stories in the Washington Informer and WashingtonInformer.com in the coming weeks. Well, it's my pleasure now to welcome Will Ford, our Prince George's County editor, as well as we mentioned before, the state delegate from Maryland. I'm having a hard time this morning, Will. So I'm glad you're going to take over this portion of the show. And we're so glad to have Delegate Jazz Lewis with us. We've had a great little intro conversation, but I'm glad you're here to carry on the conversation. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Delegate Lewis. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing just fine. Good to talk with you, Will. And thank you, Denise, for having me on.
All right. Hey, before we chat, man, about police reform in Maryland, you and I chatted some Wednesday about those pro-Trump supporters, aka domestic terrorists that stormed the Capitol. Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, you work for House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. You weren't in D.C. that day, but home working. but your colleagues were there in the Capitol. How were they and Congressman Hoyer doing?
They're a bit shaken up. Congressman Hoyer is doing well. He's in the line of succession for congressional leadership. So along with the other leaders such as Pelosi, Schumer, McConnell, et cetera, they were taken to a non-disclosed location. But their staffs weren't a part of that, right? So we had a number of junior staffers, people who were 21, 22, 25 years old that had to barricade essentially within a large closet inside the office as they heard people rampaging around them. And it was terrifying for them. I felt, my wife and I recently had a baby. So because of little Miguel, I had the fortune of working from home. I feel a little bit of guilt because many of the younger ones hadn't experienced, anything like that before. And they were, just imagine hiding in a large closet with a couple of your coworkers while you hear people trash your workplace and threaten violence against you because of who you work for and what you believe. The anger is going to stick with me for the people who incited this, for the Capitol Police for not stopping it before it got too far, though I do wish my condolences on the officer who passed away and to his family. But they shouldn't have been in that position.
From what you heard and read about the storming on the Capitol by these domestic terrorists, did it show you any necessary steps to implement police reform in Maryland as a member of the House Judiciary Committee?
Yeah, I would say first, we need to take domestic terrorism serious in this country. We all know that had the Black Lives Matter movement planned a similar protest that had people walking over to the steps of the Capitol, the response would have been very different, right? The response would have been very different. That being said, we need police reform in this country. We need policing that is built on people, caring about people, protecting people, and accountable ultimately to the people. In Maryland, we've had a number of various reports at the county level here in Prince George's. Many of the schools themselves, University of Maryland, Bowie State, are doing their own thing. But statewide, we had a work group that is reviewing this. And I think the time is now. They reviewed a number of things that, I'm going to try to briefly cover as much as possible to change, particularly one, I'm going to start with use of body-worn cameras. We have a recommendation that all police departments in the state of Maryland utilize body-worn cameras by 2025. There will be funding to correspond with that. We want to establish statewide use of force statutes so that, officers clearly know what is not okay. We're going to have a duty to intervene. So if you see an officer doing something that is beyond the use of force statute and you don't intervene to stop it, then you may be held accountable. We know the only way we can stop police violence, state-sanctioned violence against communities, is if police change their behavior and officers begin speaking up. We're going to have independent review and accountability, so you won't have the same department holding each other accountable, because we've seen that has not stopped the violence against communities at all. We're going to prohibit chokeholds and other violent acts like that, banning no-knock warrants, prohibiting the acquisition of surplus armored and military-grade equipment, because the streets of Baltimore, the streets of Capitol Heights is not Fallujah, and shouldn't be treated as if it is. A number of other things. We're going to make sure that in collective bargaining for the police unions, that disciplinary actions is not a part of it. You can argue over overtime pay and things like that, but you're not going to argue away accountability when these folks are empowered so much. We're going to require periodic mental health assessments and screenings, and just from top to bottom, we're planning to change the system. We're going to repeal the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. That is a special protection that law enforcement in Maryland has against the people. We all know a Bill of Rights is supposed to be a special protection that the people have against their government. So many changes from top to bottom.
And let our viewers know, in terms of the district you represent and some of the communities that you represent, how police reform will benefit them.
So I represent the 24th Legislative District in Prince George's County. I'm a state official, so I report to Annapolis as opposed to Upper Marlboro. My district includes neighborhoods and towns such as Glendale, Fairwood, Bowie, Largo, Lake Arbor, Glenarden, Seat Pleasant, Landover, Fairmont Heights, Capitol Heights, and Suitland as well. So the southern tip of my district is Iverson Mall, and Suitland High School with the Rams, and the northern tip is just south of NASA. So it's a very diverse community. But for anyone who's from here, once you cross that Beltway line, it's the inner Beltway, the police presence is a lot higher. So these changes are going to be critically important for our communities.
And I'm not sure how much time we have left, but I want to just touch on with you real quick. Any local legislation you're working on that affecting Prince George's County? For instance, that you and I talked about the alcohol bill. What's that bill number? And summarize that one, because you were very amped about that one.
Yes, that's PG 307-21. It's a county delegation bill that essentially what it'll do is that everyone who lives in Prince George's County or is driven through Prince George's County, you can see the drive-through liquor stores and the like. You tend to only see them in Inner Beltway. What we've seen is that the concentration of liquor stores, not liquor stores in and of themselves, but the concentration of liquor stores close together increases alcoholism, increases crime, increases overdoses, and the like. So my bill is to break up the concentration of these stores. Right now, by law, a store can't relocate to another part of the county if they wanted to. So let's say Glendale has a new community growing up. A store can't relocate there if they wanted to. My bill would allow them to do so. The other thing, when we were reviewing the density, we saw that the same places where we had alcohol density, we also had food deserts, coincidentally. So we're going to create some competition for them. We're going to incentivize grocery stores that move into food deserts exclusively, so not everywhere, but grocery stores that move into food deserts can sell beer and wine, because that'll be an added tool to allow us to track them to where we need them to go. But it'll create competition for these this oversaturation that we have to encourage them to move elsewhere. And I think that's going to be a big help for food equity, which is critically important to the Central Avenue corridor in my district, and Seat Pleasant, and Landover, and Capitol Heights. But breaking up that density will also help with economic development, because a lot of people who want to buy homes don't want to see that blight.
I got to get you to chat about Kerwin. That's a big deal in Maryland. Everyone's talking about. But summarize what you see for this particular session. So
we are going to override Kerwin. I think there might be some modest changes to it, just given our current economy. For those who aren't familiar, the Kerwin Commission was a 3-year study that showed how we can make the best world-class education system across the state as possible. It required $4 billion investments. Doing so would have every teacher start off making $60,000 a year. But then if you move into our schools in at-risk neighborhoods, you would start off making $75,000 to $77,000. All right, we're trying to put our money where our mouth is. We have to do this. I think this will be critically important to a lot of the communities that border DC line in my district. And we made a promise in the last election that we were going to get this done, and we're still going to.
And you touched on, in terms of, outline a few of the benefits for schools in the 24th district that do border the district and in more urban settings.
Like Josephina Woods, I mean, there, Suitland High School, like I referenced, Central High School, Fairmont Heights, all these schools I think would benefit. One of the other things that it changes is that essentially through the Kerwin Commission, students would effectively finish high school in 10th grade. In the last 2 years, they would either be transitioning in college prep work, so they wouldn't have to do remedial work when they get there, or they would get to try on a number of trades, which include traditional trades such as barbering or electrician work, but also more new trades like the clean energy industry and things like that, so that the high school diploma meant something again. I think that's going to be really important. Not everyone who's graduating from high school is planning to go to college, either at all or immediately, but they need to be able to get gainful employment and earn an income to take care of their family. And I think, what we've seen from this pandemic is that those who wealth-wise, we're well-resourced, we're the ones who are able to make it out of it okay. We have to, make sure these inequities are addressed throughout our county.
And just keep it in terms of education, HBCU, about that bill. Please talk a little bit about that.
So we're going to override the governor's veto of the HBCU bill. We had a bill to dedicate $577 million over 10 years to our 4 HBCUs in the state of Maryland that had been chronically underfunded and proven in court. This was a major priority of the Legislative Black Caucus, of our speaker, Adrian Jones, and mine as well. We're going to make sure that gets done.
And any other final words in terms of or summarizing what you're hoping for this session, and especially how different it'll be doing a lot of stuff virtually?
I think actually as working virtual is an opportunity for more inclusion for the community, because before you had to drive down to Annapolis. And I think that was prohibitive for a lot of people who don't have a car or can't take off of work. Now, because we can work virtually, I think you can sign up to testify from the convenience of your own home or from your workplace and just, go into the bathroom or into a closet or something like that to testify and participate in the process. It will be different. It's going to slow some things down. I just ask for people to bear with us and be patient, because none of us have been through a pandemic before. So we're all trying to do our best.
Thank you, Delegate Lewis. Appreciate it, my man. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great, and I want to thank Will Ford and Delegate Lewis for joining us in this segment of WIN TV. It's good to have our reporters themselves who are covering certain beats to bring on and be engaged with some of the folks in the community who are really making a difference. And speaking of making a difference, this week, our reporters were out there on the scene at the mayhem at the Capitol. We want to hear your thoughts, too, about what you saw this week, your concerns, the questions that you've had, the conversations that you're having around on the phone or with whomever about what happened in the nation's capital. But I want to bring on our reporters. And actually, if you have comments, you can put them in the chat or post them to the Facebook if you're watching us on Facebook. But you can also send them to us by email, because we'll be putting those things together at news@washingtoninformer.com. Again, news@washingtoninformer.com. But we want Anthony Tillman, a social media influencer and videographer, covered the demonstrations and the demonstrators from the mall to the Capitol and inside. Let's watch this video showing what Anthony captured. Amazing. And that's just some of it. Anthony, you were there. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
But you were there at the mall when all of this began. I know at one point I was watching on CNN and C-SPAN, and the crowd was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and they seemed pretty calm at that point. Until when?
Pretty much until Trump arrived. It was like, Trump spoke, and then Eric spoke, and then it was just kind of like the crowd transitioned. I think Trump and Eric Trump initiated the Capitol them actually going that way. I
When you
remember
say Eric, you're talking about Eric Trump?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So when they were speaking, the crowd trying to kind of transitioned, like, you know, to go to the Capitol. So they all kind of started, you know, leaving and heading to the Capitol. I remember the night before, we actually videotaped one of the Magma supporters actually saying that tomorrow we're going to the Capitol. You know, and you know, I was like, that's crazy. You're gonna get arrested. Like, I was literally thinking in my mind, like, these crazy people not going to no Capitol. They're gonna literally get arrested. And and they started heading that way. So I just started following them, like, okay, this is going to go nuts. It's going to go crazy. Because I mean, I remember when I was going to the Capitol, I couldn't even like get past the first barrier of the security perimeter. So I know, like, you know, I was like, man, this is going to end up bad. So I just started following along, and they literally just overtook the security borders. You know, like the first one, you can hear them yelling, USA, USA, we pay your taxes, we pay your bills, and then they just like overtook, you know, the Capitol Police, and like thousands of them just, you know, ambushed the. Yes, they was.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask too, because, you know, and I want to bring in our other reporters in part of this conversation, Anthony, but let me ask you, I mean, you're a journalist, so I understand why you were out there, and I understand why everybody was out there. But what was the feeling like? I mean, what did you know, you're a young Black man, hopefully with your press credentials. At any point, did you feel personally endangered?
Okay, so I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. The only time I actually felt like in danger was when I got inside the Capitol. Like, that was the first time I thought that I needed a bulletproof vest. I was like, I'm going to get shot in here. I'm like the only Black people in here. They gonna shoot me first. So that was like the only time, and I actually tweeted that. I said, you know, that's the only time I've been covering, you know, the protests since like December. So, you know, I've been in some deadly situations with flash bombs and, you know, rubber bullets and just explosions. So, you know, that's kind of like how my drive. Like, you know, I remember getting a few calls from people that's like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, this is like exhilarating. This is crazy. It's like I'm in the middle of the action. So, like I say, the only time that I actually felt nervous was actually when they kind of broke inside, and I was like, wow, this is really happening like right now. I'm going to literally get.
Did you ever ask yourself, in the intensity of any of these moments, what people are talking about now? You said that you participated or you've covered other events where you've experienced more aggressive police tactics. Did you ever at any point think what people are asking, if this had been Black Lives Matter, would this have been different?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you can literally see how resistant when they got past the first security border and beginning of the Capitol. It seemed like, you know, they just literally just overtook the Capitol Police. I mean, there was really no resistance from it. I mean, I honestly never really thought that it would be that easy to just kind of like get ahead of the actual security barriers. And, you know, even, you know, them being outnumbered, I assumed that they was going to kind of just, you know, get really forceful and really just start taking that stronger initiative to really get these folks back. Like, you know, I literally thought I was going to get shot. I literally thought, like, the craziest part is when that they was getting through the window. So I was on the other side by the door. So people was coming in from every different way. So when they got past that second security border, it was people coming in from different sides. You saw it was like thousands of people just bum rushing the Capitol from different angles. So
wow, okay.
I literally heard the gunshot come from the window. And my initial thought was, wow, I'm about to get shot. Like, it's about to go down. Like, it's like SWAT about to come. Wow. And I was just like so nervous. I was like, oh my God, I need a vest. I need a bulletproof vest. I got my camera and my phone, and I had my camera and my phone in my hand, and both at the same time was recording, trying to, you know, hear what was going on. And it was just at that moment, I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm crazy. Like, this is stupid, Anthony. like you're literally the only black person right now. Like you need to calm down and like this like. But the other Anthony, the other like devil was talking in my mind like.
The
Go ahead
devil.
in there, man. You need to get that
Let's get
picture.
it done. Let's
Like
get
get
it
that
done.
picture. Like get that picture, man. Like you trying to win a Pulitzer. Like you need to like you know what I'm saying like you about to win something like you know. So it was just like overwhelming.
Yeah, on the other side, I mean, we had talked to. I'm glad to bring Stacy Brown, James Wright, and Sam Collins onto the phone because they, under the direction of our editor Kevin McNair and Ron Taylor, I mean, the forces went out to make sure that we had this covered in as many ways as we could. But Stacy, at what point did you realize that this was worth covering, but was getting out of hand?
Well, it was worth covering from the beginning when you saw them, as Anthony described, headed toward the Capitol. Now you knew it couldn't be good because you knew what was going on in the Capitol. The counting of the Electoral College votes, the formal count, certification actually, and so you knew it couldn't be good. But as Anthony described, I love his vivid description of it. Even more, I love his videos. CNN, NBC, nobody has videos like Anthony Tillman. So, but you knew that this was different, and Anthony kind of touched on it. What's shocking, Denise, was how they basically was like, come on in. You know, they opened the gates, and you mentioned the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and there are reasons. There's a lot of reasons why they didn't treat this like Black Lives Matter. Number one, of course, because they didn't have black skin. But the other thing was, I think, Denise, you pointed this out several times now, that many of these Trump supporters, these protesters, these rioters, domestic terrorists, they're armed. They're dangerous people. They are military people. They are police people. We saw a congressman from Virginia join this. So there's like this camaraderie. And so we talk about the blue wall. Well, many of them are part of the blue wall. So it is a difference. And that's probably why I should say, you didn't see the response that you would see, as Anthony described, for Black Lives Matter. So, but we knew right away, you know, we are all professional journalists. We knew that this was something tantamount to, as much as you hate to hear it and you hate to say it, but it's tantamount to 9/11. This was a terrorist attack, only it was domestic terrorists. So we knew that we had to do something. The Washington Informer, of course, doesn't necessarily cover crime, but this was in the Washington Informer's backyard, so you couldn't ignore it. And it affected everybody. We saw the responses from around the world. World leaders were appalled.
Exactly. It was good. We even had one of our reporters who covers international news, Oswald Brown, to bring some of those stories to light as well. James, you and Sam both talked about the local response, the mayor, how she addressed this, our local police chief. I'm getting some feedback from somebody, James. But anyway, let's I'm gonna start with you, James. Just, you know, how did the city handle this? How do you think the mayor handled this, and our police chief?
Well, let me just say that the mayor counseled people to stay home. Near the Capitol go out. She established a curfew on a Wednesday night starting at 6 p.m. to Thursday 6 a.m. And of course, she has extended this public emergency as a result of this situation of the insurrection, really until the end of the month. I will say also, Chief Conte yesterday at the mayor's press conference complimented his own forces in terms of trying to help the Capitol Police. Let me make a real quick point on that. The Capitol Hill Police covers the Capitol grounds. Jurisdiction over the Capitol grounds. MPD does not. In order for them to come on Hill grounds, they have to be invited, which they were. And some people think that MPD can just walk on the Capitol, and that's just not the case. That's not the case at all.
Interesting. Sam, how about you? I mean, you also got involved in the story, and one day we'll kind of do a piece on police departments, because we've gotten about, we're talking about defund police and Black Lives Matter and all that. And this is one of those situations where you realize the value depending on what side you're on. But what's your take on this?
I'm very glad that you brought up that point, because when it comes to the issue of defunding police and the effectiveness of the police department, people do have varying views on that, especially as it relates to how soon the authorities could have responded and planned ahead for this catastrophe. Black Lives Matter DC, as well as other grassroots organizations, released a list of recommendations as to how they could have prevented this insurrection. And they noted that this was the third time since the election that the Proud Boys and other Trump supporters entered DC. So what happened earlier this week was not the first time that, it was an escalation, but, it could be argued that we sort of saw this coming, if not through their previous actions, then through the planning that they did online, as well as whatever Trump did to incite that violence. So, while Muriel Bowser and the police, they were responsive and they heeded to the call of the Capitol Police, there was still some criticism. Beyond that, there are some questions about DC statehood and the extent to which, the DC police could have protected federal land. There's still some confusion among people who are critical of the police about the jurisdiction and the extent to which they could have been involved in protecting on the Capitol grounds. So this situation just raises a whole lot of questions about who has power, who has autonomy in protecting the land, and once again, the extent to which DC police could have helped quell the insurrection. But as of today, we have more than 50 arrests and an investigation is underway. So we do see a lot of collaboration between MPD, the Capitol Police, and to some extent, the National Guard and the FBI.
Which is another point, because the mayor couldn't even call the FBI, call the National Guard because of her status. And people, I have to personally say, my brother who lives in Kansas called me that day and said, now I understand why DC needs statehood. But, these people are planning to come back. We've got an inauguration scheduled on January 20th. Did the mayor, James, or Stacy, or any of you all, I know Anthony's going to have his camera, so I know he'll be ready. But is the city ready? And I just want to add in another note, because I don't know how many of you all may know a reporter who was very active in the community, Valencia Muhammad, a few back in the day, but she sent a letter out to everybody saying that these folks actually dispersed into neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. They saw them in neighborhoods. And I haven't heard anybody speak to that.
Yeah. And, Denise, in addition to that, not many have spoken to that at all. But in addition to that, we talk about all this, we forget something extremely scary. They found bombs at the RNC headquarters and at the DNC headquarters, and supposedly, and this part hasn't been confirmed, but at the Capitol, there was a bomb at the Capitol. So are they going to be ready for the inauguration? The question really is, Denise, yeah, they can be ready. And I know Mayor Bowser, I called her Governor Bowser, but I know that she's going to be ready. But the question really is, do they want to be ready? Because there is, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's this growing sense, even in Congress, you talk to some, and I've spoken to some of the Congress people, that not only were police complicit, but they believe that this was conspired. And so as the federal prosecutor is looking into charges, including charges, he's looking at 3 charges into President Trump. Now, we don't really have time to really break them all down, but there are 3 charges that he's looking at and considering when it comes to President Trump. But conspiracy is a major charge regardless of the crime. Conspiracy, a federal conspiracy, can get you 20 years in federal prison. Kevin McNear, our editor at the Washington Informer, says that the Informer will be dropping a piece today on the differences, responsibilities, and different jurisdictions of Capitol Police, MPD, and the other forces. So people can look for that at the WashingtonInformer.com. But it's a lot going on. And real quick, Denise, I want to say this. I mentioned 9/11 earlier, and there's a parallel for me in the Washington Informer. 9/11, I was working for a newspaper in New York, and I was called to work early that morning to cover a case of a man who the FBI was arresting that morning at a school for hijacking a plane 20 years earlier. Well, by the time I got back to the office, I'm thinking that's going to be the big story. By the time I got to the office, the first plane had hit. Well, 8 years ago this week, you hired me to write for the Washington Informer, and I was at the Capitol with the Deltas. So here we are 8 years later at the Capitol for chaos and rioting.
So there's so much more I want to talk to you all about, but we've got two other guests that are about to come on, and we're going to talk about what I described in my editorial this week was Trump's super spreader, a spreader of hate, a spreader of violence, and a spreader of a virus, coronavirus. Thousands and thousands of unmasked people threatening Washingtonians as they marched from the mall to the Capitol. So we're going to switch now and talk about the virus. If you all can stay with us after Dr. Frederick in about 20 minutes, I'd like to come back and have more of this conversation with you if you're available, and I'd appreciate it if you just hang on. Okie doke. Thank you. So, yeah, there's so much we want to talk about with regards to what happened and what's going to happen and how our city will be prepared to deal with this issue of, or this situation, which I'm so happy that those of you all around the country have been reaching out to those of us in DC, and you're sending your regards and sympathies and support and all of that. But you know, you need to look in your own backyards as well, because you know how these folks can be. When they are sort of released, and they have been. So all of us are in harm's way, to be honest with you. But right now I'd like to bring up Dr. Cecil Bennett. Dr. Bennett is a practicing family medicine physician in Atlanta, Georgia. And after this brief introductory video, we will talk to Dr. Bennett.
I'm Dr. Cecil Bennett. I am a family physician. I feel it necessary to speak out due to my concern regarding the plan for the distribution of the COVID vaccine. I'm concerned because the plan I've heard so far for distribution of the vaccine seems to be very similar to the plan deployed at the beginning of the pandemic for testing that said, everyone who wants a test will get a test. At the time, the COVID testing plan called for the training of new workers, setting up tents, and having results back in 24 to 36 hours. By any measure, that plan did not work. So please, send the vaccine to the state governors and have them send the vaccines to us.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Bennett. I think your message is clear and strong. And tell me, why hasn't this happened?
That's a very good question. I've looked at broadcasts from the CDC, the NIH, the FDA, and at no point they're incorporating primary care physicians in the equation whatsoever.
And as I asked sort of before we got on the show, again, what difference would it make, do you think, if primary care physicians were brought into the picture?
Well, I'm a former member of the Membership Commission for the American Academy of Family Physicians that represents 120,000 family doctors across the United States. We're in every community. We're in the inner city, we're in rural communities, we're in farm areas. So literally, we're in every part of the country from East Coast to West Coast. We have electronic health records so we can easily manage our patients, and we have relationships with our patients. So it'd be very easy for us to vaccinate the majority of Americans in a very short time.
Thank you. You know, we have joining us the president of Howard University, Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick, who has also been, I think, an astounding voice, not only for people staying safe from the virus, but also now he's had the vaccine and also has a message. But welcome to the show, Dr. Frederick.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess you've heard Dr. Bennett and understand the issue that he's raising. I know we were going to talk about some other things, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe weigh in on his thoughts.
Yeah, I think he's spot on. The logistics of the distribution of the vaccine is critical, complicated but critical. And I think the best way for us to go about managing that, as he so rightly pointed out, is we have to use the common pathways that patients are already comfortable with. And one common pathway that patients are very comfortable with are their primary care physicians. And I have argued very strongly that they should be at the forefront of any algorithm that involves getting the vaccine out to the community. The community, they're going to go to trusted faces, trusted voices. And many people will tell you, I'm not going to do that until I talk to my doctor. And if your doctor says do it, there's a far greater chance that they'll do it.
Oops. I'm sorry. I got rid of myself. Maybe you all could have a great conversation and I could just sit back because doctor to doctor, I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Dr. Frederick, you've had the vaccine. I don't know if you've had it. Have you had it yet, Dr. Bennett?
Yes, my second dose is due on Sunday.
So I'm curious to hear from both of you. Did you have, were there any effects of the vaccine that you can talk to us about?
Yeah, so I had my first and second doses. I had my second dose earlier this week on Tuesday. After the first dose, I was fine, a little soreness in my shoulder. And then the next day, I had what we call myalgias, just general muscle aches, achiness as you would have if you got the cold. We sometimes confuse that with, getting the cold or the virus. And really what it is your immune system is reacting. And that's part of kind of the entire syndrome of symptoms or constellation of symptoms that you get. This time with the second shot, I definitely had more of that reaction on the first day as opposed to the day after. I took it on Tuesday, felt that way, went home and got in bed. And by the next day, I was perfectly fine and have no residual symptoms now.
And Dr. Bennett, what about yourself?
Well, for me, I had zero symptoms. So I'm sorry, Dr. Frederick, you went through so much, but my arm wasn't sore. I felt perfectly normal after the first dose. So we'll see what happens after Sunday.
So how do you all feel about communicating this message to particularly African Americans who are leery of vaccines? I think now that individuals like yourselves and so many frontline workers, we've seen pictures upon pictures, videos of all people getting these vaccines. But how are we addressing the fear or concern of African Americans about getting the vaccine?
Yeah, two things. I think one, we have to look at the data. The studies that were done demonstrate that the vaccine was well tolerated and safe. And so I think we have to educate. We're not trying to force anyone to take the vaccine, but what we're trying to make sure is that they have all the information so they make an informed decision. But the second thing is a little different. I have a slightly different perspective on my second point here. And that is that just think of late April, May, starting to get warm. Significant numbers of people have now had the vaccine and are beginning to go out, open up the economy. The people at the front line, the people who will be waiters and waitresses, cashiers at grocery stores, and in other places, hotels, people who are cleaning, doing custodial work, those people now are going to be exposed. And if those people are minorities who have not received the vaccine, they run the risk of contracting a virus from people who, while they will have less chance of transmitting the virus, will not get sick. You'll have more asymptomatic spread then. And unfortunately, the most vulnerable population is the population that already has been hit hard. And we can have a crisis in the African American community at that point. And so I think it is critical that we get significant numbers of African Americans to have the vaccine when it's appropriate for them to do so, to avoid what I think could be a catastrophe in the early spring.
Dr. Bennett, how do you feel that your argument, what you're trying to stress, how do you think that's going to change? Are you being heard? Do you think that physicians will finally get a chance to be a part of this army of protecting Americans?
Well, I think it's going to be important, and I'm glad that Dr. Frederick is speaking out about the need for primary care physicians, because I really believe that's the only way we're going to realistically get a significant number of African American and other Black and Brown people immunized. But let me say this too about some of the misinformation that's out there within our communities that I really wanted to dispel. You know, there's a lot said about the Tuskegee experiment and how people don't want to take the vaccine because of that. But let's be clear about that. The Tuskegee experiment took place in Macon County, Alabama, from 1932 to 1972, where Black men were not infected with syphilis. What happened was the U.S. Department of Public Health and the CDC followed men that were infected, a little over 400 men that were infected already with the virus, and did not treat them for over 40 years, which is unethical. So that was a situation where men were infected and were not treated by the federal government. When it comes to COVID, our community is more disproportionately affected by this virus. And the government is saying, we want to vaccinate you, we want to protect you. So I believe getting the vaccine actually honors those men who took place in that, who were a part of that unethical study, and not getting the vaccine actually dishonors their memories.
Interesting point. Interesting point. So the rollout of the vaccine, of course, is still, if primary care physicians aren't in the picture, we're looking at pharmacies. We're looking at, as Dr. Frederick said, grocery stores, different places like that. But I think people are still trying to figure out where they're going to stand in line. I know that we've been seeing people over the age of 65 standing in long lines waiting to get a vaccine. We're concerned, and Dr. Frederick, that I'm curious about your students at Howard. Will a vaccine be required in order for them to come back to school? How does that work once it gets down below, say, those frontline workers and the seniors?
Yes, so it's a good question. Actually, right now in our algorithm, we have included our healthcare students who are doing clinical rotations in our frontline staff. So they will be getting the vaccine fairly soon. When it comes back to school, we follow the DC Department of Health regulations. They have immunization requirements. If they add a COVID-19 vaccine to it, we will certainly then require it by law. Regardless, though, of whether they add it or not, we will be encouraging our students to get it, because while it's highly unlikely that they will contract COVID and get very ill, they will be in touch with our faculty. We employ more African American faculty than any other higher ed institution in the country, and as a result, we have a responsibility to ensure that faculty is protected. And one way to do that is to avoid them coming in contact with students who may have the virus. And so we will be encouraging them to get vaccinated, as much to protect our elders, as it were, in the community. So we're all in this together.
This is a totally different conversation, but I want to give credit to Howard University, where I transferred from another school in my junior year of college. Howard had the requirement that students take a sickle cell test. It was the first time I'd had one. It was the first time I realized I had the trait. It was the first time that my father realized he had the trait, because of the medical clinic on the campus, not the hospital, the clinic on the campus of Howard University. So I had to commend you all for that. And it was life-changing, actually, for us. But when you all saw, I just want to go back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and saw this event happening in our nation's capital, at the Capitol, and what I call the super spreader event. I mean, what went through your mind, not only as it relates to just the crazy violence and stuff that was going on, but the fact that there were thousands of people unmasked? What does that mean? And what is the impact of that, did you think, when you saw it?
You know, that's the America we live in. I keep hearing people referring to what happened a couple of days ago as it was un-American. I think that's a mistake. That is the America we live in today. So we live in an America where we are facing a pandemic, and a very large number of the population do not believe in the serious nature of it, because quite frankly, when they have contracted it, they wouldn't die from it. What they fail to realize is that we are losing seniors at a very, very high number, and we are exposing frontline healthcare workers, and we're losing far more than we would have lost in other years. The other thing that I think they're also failing to realize is that the longer the pandemic goes on, we're actually affecting the health of everyone. Because ultimately, if you look at something like cancer screenings, it's down 89% because people are not going into hospitals. So we're going to have an explosion of people with colon cancer and prostate cancer, with late-stage disease. And again, disproportionately, that affects our minority community. So unfortunately, this is the America we're living in today.
And I would add that, you know, over my shoulder is a painting of John Lewis, one of my patients actually painted for me. And I wonder what he'd be thinking based on what we saw happen a couple of days ago. And, you know, as a healthcare worker, I see all those people are unmasked. And if they get into trouble, they're coming to my office or going to the hospital where we have to treat them because of, you know, mistakes, let's just call it that, they were making the days before. So they expose me, they expose my family and my loved ones for no necessary reasons. But, you know, as a physician, these are just things that we encounter and we deal with it. We mask, we do what we need to do to treat our patients, regardless of the circumstances as to why they come to us.
So I know we're getting to the end of the program. I want to give both of you all an opportunity to give sort of a closing remark, an appeal, whatever's in your heart or in your mind before we end. And I'll start with you, Dr. Frederick.
Yeah, you know, first I want to commend you and the Washington Informer for putting this on. We have to get the word out. We have to continue to educate our community. I want people to get information. That's what my request is. I don't want you to go out and get a vaccine if you're unsure about it. What I want you to do is to seek advice from people like Dr. Bennett in your community. And then once you get that advice, you need to make a decision. And we hope that the decision you make would be to get the vaccine.
All right. Well, Dr. Frederick, stay safe, stay well. And thank you so much for being with us. And feel free to come back anytime.
Sure. Thanks for having me again. Both of you guys stay safe, and Dr. Bennett, please continue doing the things you're doing. We appreciate it.
Nice to speak with you as well. And I would say that my final message would be, you know, we're in a time now that's very difficult, but we can get through this. I mean, we can be back to normal within the next, I would say, 7 to 8 months if primary care physicians are considered the tip of the sword when it comes to vaccinating America. So I'm really imploring everyone listening to me to contact their state senator, their state governors, and to have their governor contact their state Academy of Family Physicians. They'll get access to a database of thousands of primary care physicians across the entire state. They can put together a portal, and through that portal, they can start sending physicians like me vaccine. So in a very short period of time, we can have this pandemic behind us if, again, primary care physicians are incorporated at the front of the pandemic front line.
Dr. Bennett, thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for bringing up, you know, that issue, something that a lot of us don't even think about, but we're glad that you're there, and Dr. Frederick and so many others that look like us in the front lines of helping to protect our community. So we wish you well, and thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me, Denise.
All righty. So this brings us into another edition of WIN TV. We are going to have what we call after hours. So if our reporters are still here, we're going to go back and talk a little bit more about what we saw this week. If you have to leave, I just want to let you know that next Friday, January 15th, would have been Dr. Martin Luther King's 91st birthday. we will be airing a show, and we're going to be talking with members of the MLK Holiday DC Planning Committee to talk about the plans that are coming up for the Martin Luther King Parade and Peace Walk. It will be a virtual event this year, but we will be talking about the details of that. And for those that want to know more about that, go to mlkholidayDC.org. Again, mlkholidayDC.org to find the details. And if you have something that you're planning for the King holiday, a community service project, church program, community program, whatever you're doing, just go ahead and there's a way you can load that to the website, because we want to be a portal for that event. So until then, you have a great week. And if you want to stick with us, we'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. So let's go back. I mean, well, first of all, let me see if there's a way. Would you all want to respond to some of the things that you heard with regards to the super spreader event? That's where we ended before, and some of the comments from Dr. Frederick. And I know, Anthony, because you were there, how many people did you see with masks?
Not many. That's like the first thing I thought about was when I was like, wow, it's not like hardly no one with a mask on out here. So I definitely was really like aware of my surrounding. I was definitely trying to stay as far away from people as possible. When people was talking to me or just like bumping up to people, it was a really like intense scene. So I'm assuming that people wasn't aware that people wasn't wearing masks as well. So that's kind of was one of the things that you kind of you saw. And as you know, MAG supporters never really was real advocates of the mask in the first place. So they never really wore a mask. So that's one thing that you have to, out of every protest that I've covered, majority of them wasn't never wearing masks. So I think that's one thing, especially at the monument,
Right.
at the National Mall. It was a lot of people out there, and I literally think like 90% of them wasn't wearing masks.
Stacy and James, I want to go back to the question about the inauguration, and what if anything you may have heard the mayor say about how they're going to what the effort is going to be, or the police chief, or the secretary of the army, or the National Guard, any of them. I mean, how are they going to stage this inauguration, even if it's just, the members of Congress or the president-elect and vice president-elect just getting sworn in on that day? Like you said, Stacy, it was what was going on inside of the Capitol that brought those people to break in. There's a more significant event that's going to happen on the 20th. Have they talked about it?
Well, certainly they have spoken about it. We heard of all people, the U.S. attorney talk about it. But you also will have Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, George Bush, a lot of dignitaries there. So when that happens, that they will, and certainly given what just happened, you'll have extra Secret Service just because you have the former presidents will be there, except Trump won't be there. He said today there's no way he's going to that inauguration. And now it appears, at first Mike Pence appeared to have committed to go, and now it's a big question as to whether he's going to go. But nonetheless, withstanding that, there's going to be a presence. It's not going to be a lot of people allowed there anyway. So you'll have a show of force, and I don't think that many will be as concerned. But when you have such radicals and they see that type of show of force, you have to be prepared, certainly much more prepared than they were on Wednesday.
And there's a great possibility because terrorists do terrorizing things, and there's a great possibility that there could be something to happen that takes away from that event. And I'm not trying to predict or put ideas out there, which I probably just did, but you just
They already
never
have
know.
an idea, Denise. Don't worry.
Thank you. I don't want to be responsible. And then. James, what about, did you hear anything from the mayor's press conference on yesterday?
Did we lose James? You're on mute.
What the city is going to do in terms of, can you hear me now?
You guys are on mute, both Denise and James.
I know we can't hear James, and James, you all can't hear me. So, all right, James, go ahead.
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, we haven't heard a solid plan from the mayor yet. Keep in mind, Washington, D.C. has been, and I think Stacy's going to be writing about this next week, has been doing these inaugurations since 1801. In some sort of form or fashion. So the city has a playbook in terms of doing this. And but it'll have to be different because of COVID-19 and, of course, of the nonsense that took place at the Capitol. And the Metropolitan Police Department will have to coordinate with all the other law enforcement agencies in the area in order to make sure that those folks don't mess up the inauguration. But I agree with Stacy. They're probably going to try something.
And James, on another note, one of the things that you've written about is the mayor. And we talked earlier, Stacy has a show that I had the pleasure of being on this morning. Stacy, tell us the name of your early morning program.
Well, Denise, I'm glad you got up for it. It was fantastic. It's called Let It Be Known.
Fantastic. And it broadcasts every morning at 7:30, at least Eastern time, on Facebook and on Black Press USA. So I would advise everybody to check in. But one of the things we talked about was the Eleanor Holmes Norton's bill, right, to hopefully bring statehood to the District of Columbia, 51st state, and also the rules change that.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that, James.
Sure. First of all, I'll talk about the Washington, D.C. Admissions Act. This is Eleanor Holmes Norton bill that would grant the district and make the district the 51st state in the union. That bill already has, even though it's early in the session, 202 original co-sponsors. Keep in mind, it takes 218 in order to pass legislation. That is an extraordinary accomplishment for any member of Congress in order to get that number of co-sponsors of legislation early in the session. And so it bodes very well in terms of her bill. She's gotten commitments from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as well as Steny Hoyer, who is the House Majority Leader, that it will be on the floor sometime this year, probably sooner better than later. In terms of a rules change, the mayor of the District of Columbia now has the floor privileges on the House of Representatives. That was a result of the rules changes that was supported by, of course, offered by Ms. Norton and supported by Pelosi. What that does is that really puts Muriel Bowser or any district mayor, she may be the last district mayor, in terms of being able to go to the floor of the House like other governors and the territories have the privilege to do so. So even though we're not at statehood yet, we're making these, and I like to use Eleanor's favorite term, incremental steps in order to get there, and that's one of them.
Stacy, I want to ask you too, being a member of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and so many times I have even advocated for the publishers to do more to support the district in its plight for statehood. People around the country still don't understand what we are. It's as if they think we are a state. They don't understand that and then there's some who say we don't deserve to be a state. What's your have you done anything on this, and what's your take on it?
Well, yeah, my take is that those who say that DC doesn't deserve to be a state haven't been paying attention, and haven't been paying attention for a long time. This is something, as you know, and James knows, that Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton has been fighting for decades. And there's a lot of things we saw, again, going back to what happened at the Capitol, right? Mayor Bowser, her hands were tied because MPD, the Metropolitan Police, are not allowed to go into the Capitol unless invited, right? So when this happened on Mayor Bowser's, on DC's turf, if you will, right? It's like somebody coming to your house, breaking into your house, and there's nothing you can do about it. You might have all the weapons and ammunition possible to defend yourself, but by law, you can't. So there's a lot with, I mean, that's just one small tip. I know we don't have a lot of time, but that's just one small piece there. So to say that DC doesn't deserve statehood is quite ridiculous. Look, Muriel Bowser, and I was calling her this morning. You mentioned my show, Let It Be Known. I was calling her Mayor Bowser. I mean, Governor Bowser, because she certainly, she certainly, it was much more in control than President Trump, right? So, or anybody else for that matter. And I just enjoyed the way that she took the lead. You know, Rudy Giuliani, who everyone knows now as that zany, wacky, riot inciting Trump lawyer. You know, when we had 9/11, he was the mayor of New York at the time. And there was this movement because it was the end of his term. And there was this movement that he led, actually, to try and it had term limits in New York, to try and extend his term, because he became known for some reason as America's mayor because of the way he led in that situation. Well, in just one press conference, and I know she's done more than just one press conference, but in one press conference, Mayor Bowser was much more of a leader, showed much more leadership than Giuliani in all those 9/11 press conferences and things he did in 9/11. And there was a lot of passion there. Usually politicians are, it's faked. It's faux, right? They're not that connected. Well, Mayor Bowser is very, very, and I'm not a fan, I'm just speaking as a journalist. She's really connected with Washington, D.C. And she really, you have to tip your hat to her. The lead that she's taken, and the lead that you will see her take going forward toward inauguration is going to be something to watch. So, like I said, those who believe DC doesn't deserve statehood just haven't been paying attention.
So she's a fourth generation Washingtonian. So yes, you're right. She is DC. But I do want to ask, I guess, in closing, and it's a question you posed earlier, and Anthony, you may even have some feelings about how that may happen. There are folks that are thinking of impeaching the president again, invoking, what is it, the 25th
Amendment, yes.
Amendment to get him out, or just as I heard someone on some other talk show say the other day, just pack him up, put him on a plane, and send him to Mar-a-Lago so he can play golf. But if there is some punishable action, Anthony, how do you think, you were around those people, you talk to them, what is there a feeling that you have that they're not done?
It doesn't seem like they're done. There was they definitely it was like some cult like followings these past couple weeks. Just everything that even blocking him on social media still doesn't take away his impact on people's minds. Just hearing him talk and just hearing how people just follow him with everything that he says. I mean, it was definitely like a cult vibe there. I mean, just this fact that you can say, let's all go to the Capitol and cause some trouble, and everybody just start going to the Capitol. That was his fault. I mean, and I really want people to understand that, that his past 4 years has been pretty much one of the craziest times that we ever had for a president. And as far as impact of racism and just hate all around, and that just watching these past moments of just hatred and just protests that we as African Americans can't even do, or without repercussions, is troubling for all of us. And one thing I will say in closing is that I watched a lot of reporters and camera crews, and just their camera equipment was damaged because of the hate for the media. And I really wanted to shout out all the media people. I'm proud of everything that we do to cover the news, because it was a lot of people that got their camera damaged and just called out and hatred because of what they represented and who they work for. And I believe there's no fake news. We all tell a story. We all have our views. We all have it. So no matter what people say, Black press matters more, because our views need to be more representative in a white privileged nation. So
Thank you so
that's
much
one thing
about
that I
that.
will
Yeah.
say.
Interesting, Anthony. And then one other question I wanted to ask you about your observations down there, because I haven't heard much conversation about that. Everyone's talking about how do we talk to our children about what happened. Didn't people have their children out there on Wednesday?
Yes, it was a lot of children. I literally, as I was videotaping, I saw women just carrying like their bags and the children's in the carts, and I was just like, wow. And even at the last protest, you had people out there having their children speak for them, like just having their children speak to the public about what they view and what they think happened. And that's the thing that we have to do. Parents need to do a better job of just letting their children just learn and just have their own mindset. Don't force them to do something that you want them to do. That's one thing that we have to change, is the mental health and awareness of our children in our environments, and what we're immune them to do and listen to. We have to do a better job of just antagonizing them not to be that person because of what we are, and let them have their own mindset and their own views on what's going on. Because it was a woman out there just yelling, telling her child what to say on the microphone. She was just like, and these kids are just going to listen. They're not going to question their parents.
Right. Now, I appreciate that. And I know that people will say, on all sides. I mean, Black Lives Matter folks had, their children out there, and we've had, these folks had them out there. And it is a teaching moment. But as one, Anthony, who has written children's books, I get your position on that. Stacy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Anthony, because you're right. And one of your viewers, Denise, Michael Von Lasseter, says, unfortunately, hate is passed down to children. It is a learned condition. And what's interesting, look, the president, they're acting out because they listening to him, and he's pretty much pulling the strings. So Anthony is totally right. And just a quick side note, and I'll let you get to James. We got to wake James up over there. But quick side note, just prior to this, there was a video we found this morning, brand new video of Donald Trump, Eric Trump, Kimberly Guilford, Mark Meadows, and a whole bunch of Trump supporters and family members was in a tent. I guess, I don't know if it's next to the White House or somewhere else. They was playing music. They were partying. And on the screen there, they had the crowd, the large crowd that was building. And so you saw their awkward dancing and stuff. And Trump was egging on Kimberly and to keep dancing. And he was talking about Mark Meadows. And they were really, pumped up and celebrating this moment just moments before the riot. So
Yeah.
it's cultish.
Well,
So
that's
how
before
did he get from the mall to the Capitol and then back to the party, or did he even go
The
to
party
the
was
Capitol?
before. So the video that he was talking about was actually before the riot. So this is when we all was at the National Mall, and I think he had like a
But the
something.
question is, which I have not heard the answer to. I think I know it, but did he actually march with them to the Capitol?
No,
no, he didn't march. No.
He initiated them to go to the Capitol because that was before he spoken. He was just watching the screen and just watching everything going live, and you can see.
So despite the fact that he told them, "I'm going with you,"
right?
That was fake news.
Yeah, he definitely told them. Hey,
All
just
right,
like he drove around. Just like he drove around at the hospital. He thought he was with them at that as well. He just driving around. He thinks he's with them at these moments where he just kind of initiating things, and it's definitely crazy. How he just kind of thinks they're like he's a part of the movement when he's really not.
So we're gonna wrap this up, and I'm gonna start with James. James, do you have any closing remarks or anything that you might want to say, talk about as relates to this, or what people in the community need to be concerned about as it relates to the inauguration or the mayor, your projection for the new Congress? We'll talk about that later, but any of those things.
Let me just say that the District of Columbia is in the national spotlight now. Personal opinion, want to go back to what you were saying about what they should do with President Trump. You don't have the time to really conduct a thorough. I think that at the best, both in the House can pass. Well, the Senate can't because they've adjourned until the day before the swearing in. But the House could pass a censure resolution and just leave it at that. Let the man go back to Florida. Let him go and let this man go into the past where he belongs. And in terms of the city needs to be ready for that nonsense that his people are going to come up here with, and be ready and to quell them and crush them as they do that, because we can't let them ruin our beautiful city.
All right, thank you, James. Anthony?
Yes.
Any closing remarks?
Black press matters. It's time for us to be representative more in this, in this world. And I think we need to, do a better job at just, being at these breaking moments, just really capturing these tales and just, adversity of our people. Because, being in those moments mean a lot, because we're there to cover these breaking news, and that exhilarating moment is what is happening right now with all of us. And I think, I salute people like, black press organizations like yourself, because we need to be more representative on Twitter. Dear Twitter, if you're watching this, we need to be verified. I need you to verify all black press organizations ASAP. Twitter, at Twitter. Watch this, verify all black press organizations. I'm going to keep posting this every single month until you do it. Black press matters.
Thank you, Anthony. And the other thing I don't want to get into this discussion, but I am curious, because when you talk about black press was there, we know black people were there too, with those marchers. We'll talk about that another time. Stacy Brown, your closing remarks?
Well, first of all, Anthony, they might wind up giving us a black check mark instead of a blue verification mark. So that's okay. But I think either Tuesday, certainly no later than Wednesday, there will be an impeachment of Donald Trump by the House of Representatives. There's no question about it. It's going to happen. And people say, well, what does that matter? He's leaving in a few days anyway. It matters. Bill Clinton was impeached. Not many presidents were impeached, and no president was impeached twice. So Trump has designs on running again in 4 years. That should hurt him. That makes that more than just a procedural thing. But I also think you'll see this year reparations bills passed. Sheila Jackson Lee's HR 40, which will then create a commission to explore reparations. I think that will certainly pass. I think statehood will definitely happen. I think you'll see that happen. May not be this year, but I don't know how long the process will take once Congress does ratify it. Certainly, Joe Biden has indicated that he would support it. So I don't see no reason why he'd go back on his word with that. So that is a couple of things you will see this year. I'm not so positive that or optimistic that we're gonna see the end of the coronavirus this year. I know nobody wants to hear that, but we have to bring the news, right? So and I just don't see that happening. I know again, President-elect Biden has a lot of plans for the distribution of the virus, of the vaccine. I keep saying giving people the vaccine. And so I think we probably have to ride out at least for the first half of this year, maybe most of the second half too with the virus. But if we wear a mask, social distance, wash our hands for 20 seconds at least, and just be smart, we can get this behind us. But it's a lot. I think we're gonna have it goes without saying, Anthony and James, we're gonna have a lot more breaking news this year. It's gonna be unexpected, but we got to be ready.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you all for being with us today and for sharing your insights as it relates to not only what we saw this week, the insurrection and the mayhem in the nation's capital, but also successful politics. We didn't get a chance to talk much about Georgia and some other issues, but the point is you all are still here, and we can have you back in future weeks. And we certainly did enjoy the conversation. And I want to wish you well. I want to thank those of you all who were watching. Vera Abbott, who happens to be my mother, has been watching and sending us some comments. Thank you for joining. Michael Lassiter, who happens to be Sherry's husband. This is a true family affair.
And Denise, say hi to Kim Curtis there. She's watching. I know Kim. Hey, Kim.
All right, thank you, Kim, and for all of those that you're watching, when you're watching the show, we'd love for you to share it with your friends and family and colleagues or whoever's following you on Facebook. So, gentlemen, I'm gonna let you go. Have a great weekend. Be safe, and keep those pencils sharpened. All right, thank you so much, and thanks for staying over with us. Every now and then we're gonna have to have an after show. So if we do, we're glad you can join us, and we hope to see you this time next week. Until then, have a safe weekend. So long.